The wrecking ball hit my living room before I had even finished my coffee. From the patio, I watched my two-story glass wall shatter into a glittering waterfall of safety glass, the crane groaning as it swung back for another hit. A flock of HOA board members stood at the curb in matching polo shirts, filming the demolition like it was a neighborhood improvement project and not a felony. In the middle of them, wearing a sun visor and an expression of righteous fury, stood Beverly Carowway. She was the HOA president, self-appointed guardian of property values, and the woman currently screaming into a megaphone. "This is what happens," she bellowed, "when you don't pay your fees, Mr. Hazelwood." I took another sip of coffee, checked my phone to make sure the county sheriff and my lawyer were both on their way, and scrolled through the demolition permit. It was issued by the HOA, on land I owned, for a house I also owned, in a subdivision I legally controlled. They just didn't know that last part yet. My name is Ethan Hazelwood, and all I really wanted was to be left alone in my stupidly large lakefront mansion. I'm not mysterious, I'm just tired. I write boring software for logistics companies. One of them got acquired, some stock did some math, and suddenly I could afford a ridiculous house. So I bought one. Lot 1. Cypress Harbor Estates. A glass and stone monument to poor impulse control, right on the edge of Cypress Lake. The neighborhood looked like a brochure. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and neighbors who waved with exactly the right amount of enthusiasm. The HOA covenants read like a light horror novel, but my realtor assured me they were mostly chill, just there to keep things nice. Mostly chill turned out to be Beverly Carowway. Beverly was the kind of woman who said, per my last email, in casual conversation. She ran Cypress Harbor's HOA with the energy of a small, angry government. Blonde bob, clipboard, permanent squint. She moved through the streets like a parking ticket had manifested as a person. I had barely finished moving in when the first letter arrived. Violation notice, unapproved curtain color. Your interior drapes, visible from the street, are a non-compliant shade of charcoal, not approved in the Cypress Harbor design guidelines. Please remedy within 7 days. That was the moment I knew Beverly and I were going to have a problem. The violations escalated fast. First it was the curtains. Then it was my non-harmonious Tesla color, too matte, very dystopian, she wrote. That was followed by a formal complaint about my aggressively modern outdoor furniture. When I ignored the decor micromanagement, Beverly shifted strategy. I installed a small security camera above my garage, and suddenly I was cited for non-approved exterior electronics. I put a small herb planter on my back deck, and she called it undeclared agricultural activity. I had a friend visit with a camper van for a weekend, and she issued a $250 fine for temporary mobile dwelling units. My mailbox became a fire hose of stationary threats. Certified letters, pink slips, final warning notices, each one more dramatic than the last. When that didn't move me, Beverly started physically showing up. I would be working in my office and see her, mid-50s and furious, pacing along my property line, taking photos like a crime scene tech. Twice I caught her on my side of the lake path, checking easements she claimed. Once, I watched her crouch behind my hedge with a tape measure, calculating whether my landscaping gravel exceeded the permitted stone size. Then came the dues. According to the original HOA schedule, my yearly dues were $900. Reasonable enough. Trash, landscaping for common areas, the usual racket. I paid them online, set it to auto, forgot about it. 3 months later, I received a thick envelope. Notice of serious delinquency. You are 6 months overdue on HOA assessments, late fees, administrative charges, and enforcement penalties totaling $14,380.72. Attached was a spreadsheet that looked like it had been generated by someone whose love language was itemized extortion. There were charges for unresponsive to HOA communication fee, $75. Board review of non-compliance, $125. Special assessment for neighborhood brand enhancement initiative, $1,200. Hostile tone in email, implied, $50. At the bottom, in bold, it read failure to pay may result in liens, foreclosure, or other actions deemed necessary by the board. I sent a calm, 3-sentence email. All dues have been paid according to the recorded covenants. Additional fees are rejected. Any attempt to lien or foreclose will be met with legal action. Beverly replied with a 4-page PDF and the subject line, "You leave us no choice." The no choice turned out to be fraud, trespassing, and a truly insane level of confidence. First, Beverly organized an emergency board meeting. This was attended exclusively by Beverly, her best friend Carol, and a man who seemed to exist solely to nod at things. They voted to declare my property in chronic non-compliance, levy a non-optional emergency special assessment, and authorize corrective action up to and including removal of structures harmful to neighborhood values. Then Beverly did something bold and deeply stupid. She filed demolition paperwork with the county, claiming that I had abandoned the property, the house was structurally unsound, and the HOA had the legal right to remediate blight. She attached fake minutes, a forged owner notice, and what appeared to be my signature, badly traced from a document I had signed at closing. The county clerk, likely glazed over from a long day of permit applications, rubber-stamped it. A week later, Beverly hired her cousin's contracting company, the kind whose logo is a poorly photoshopped eagle, and scheduled the demolition for 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. The only thing she didn't know was that I hadn't just bought a house. I had bought Cypress Harbor Estates, LLC. The developer, in their infinite tax-avoiding wisdom, had never fully dissolved their entity or transferred declarant rights. When I bought the Lakefront mansion, I also quietly bought the LLC that technically still owned the common areas, the private road, and the HOA's very legal skeleton. Which meant Beverly's HOA was legally subordinate to me. I discovered this 3 months earlier. I had my lawyer quietly file some documents, update the state registry, and then I waited. And now, standing in my robe as a wrecking ball took bites out of my kitchen, I decided Beverly had finally gone big enough to go extinct. The crane was mid-swing when the sheriff's SU versus rolled up. 2 cruisers, lights flashing, pulled across the private road, my road, and blocked the contractor's equipment. Deputies stepped out, hands up in the universal "everyone stop being idiots" gesture. Beverly stormed toward them, flanked by her board police. "Officers," she started, voice dripping with authority she did not possess, "you're interrupting an authorized demolition under HOA authority." "Ma'am," the lead deputy cut in, holding up a thick stack of papers, "we just came from the county records office." He turned to me. "Mr. Hazelwood?" "Morning," I said. "Nice day for massive insurance fraud, apparently." He nodded. "That's what we're here to discuss." Turns out, my attorney had beaten the demolition by an hour, walking into the county office with the updated LLC documents showing I owned Cypress Harbor Estates LLC, the original declaration of covenants giving the declarant, me, authority over the HOA, and a fresh motion for an emergency injunction. The county clerk, suddenly very interested, called the judge. The judge, having had his own fun with an HOA years ago, signed the injunction so fast the ink was probably still wet when the deputies got it. The deputy handed Beverly the injunction. "This says," he read, "that the HOA has no independent authority to order demolition, that the property is not abandoned, and that any further action will be considered criminal trespass and destruction of property." Beverly went pale. "That can't be right," she sputtered. "I'm the president. We voted. We have bylaws." The deputy held up another page. "And this says the declarant, that's Mr. Hazelwood here, retains full control over the HOA, the common elements, and any structural alterations. This HOA is still technically developer-controlled." She blinked. "That's impossible. The developer left years ago." "He sold," I said, "to me." You could feel the energy shift. Turning points in movies have dramatic music. In real life, it's just the sound of one very entitled person realizing the universe has receipts. The deputies shut down the site. The crane operator, who wanted absolutely no part of this, quietly powered down and went to sit in his truck. Beverly tried one last swing. "We'll sue," she snapped. "The board will not tolerate this harassment." "Oh, the board?" I asked. "Funny you mention them." And that's when I introduced my second surprise of the morning. 3 weeks earlier, after recognizing Beverly's energy levels, I had taken some precautions. I had quietly purchased 3 more properties in Cypress Harbor. 1 rental, 1 corporate guest house, and one small lake cottage. Each purchase came with voting rights in the HOA. Then I exercised my declarant privilege and called a shareholders' meeting. Attendance was low. People tend not to show up for extra meetings labeled boring legal housekeeping, especially when the snacks are bad. The few who did appear were mostly younger families who already hated the HOA. In that tiny fluorescent-lit rec room, using a combination of declarant rights and majority votes, we rewrote the bylaws, added a clause capping fines at a reasonable amount, stripped the board of unilateral enforcement powers, required all major actions to be approved by the declarant, me, and most importantly, created a new position, Community Oversight Officer. I appointed myself. It passed unanimously among the 5 people who realized this was their only shot. We also scheduled another vote. Board re-election, effective the first business day after the upcoming special enforcement action Beverly had threatened in her email. Today was that day. So while the deputies were still there, my attorney walked up with a stack of fresh paperwork and a small, evil smile. Per the updated bylaws, he said, handing Beverly a notice, the declarant has called an emergency board session and vote. He turned to the handful of neighbors who had crept out in pajamas to watch the drama unfold. Those of you who signed the proxy forms, your votes are now being exercised. He read the result. Effective immediately, the following changes are in effect. Beverly Carowway is removed as HOA president. The current board is dissolved. All enforcement actions initiated in the past 6 months are suspended pending review. A temporary administrator appointed by the declarant, also Mr. Hazelwood, will take over operations. Beverly made a sound like a teakettle about to explode. "You can't do that," she shouted. "This is my neighborhood." I pointed to the sign at the front of the subdivision, the one she had lovingly had installed. "Welcome to Cypress Harbor Estates, a Hazelwood Communities development." "That's awkward," I said. "Because legally, it's mine." The neighbors started connecting the dots. The couple who had been fined for their 2 whimsical Halloween decorations were cheering quietly. The retired guy who had been harassed over his unapproved American flag was grinning openly. The deputy, now clearly enjoying himself, stepped closer to Beverly. "Ma'am, at this point, you're looking at a forged signature on a permit application, unauthorized demolition on private property, and misuse of HOA funds. I suggest you stop talking." For the first time since I had met her, Beverly did exactly what she was told. She shut up. The county launched an investigation into the fraudulent permit. The state licensing board took a long, unpleasant look at Beverly's cousin's contracting business. Within 2 months, Beverly was personally sued for the cost of the partial demolition, legal fees, and misuse of HOA funds totaling $87,000. The state filed criminal charges for forgery and fraud, which carried a potential sentence of 3 to 5 years. When the judge read the charges in court, Beverly's face went from red to white in seconds. Her lawyer tried to argue it was a misunderstanding, but the forged signature and fake meeting minutes were impossible to explain away. The judge set bail at $50,000 and scheduled her trial. Beverly stood there, shaking, as the bailiff explained the next steps. Her hands trembled as she signed the paperwork. "This isn't fair," she whispered, but no one was listening anymore. She turned to look at me one last time, her eyes filled with disbelief and rage, before being escorted out of the courtroom.